The world of Mushoku Tensei has a complex and very long history. In Volume 2 of the light novel, during his time in Roa, Rudius decides to spend some time learning about the history of his new world, and he gives us a basic summary of important events and the status quo of the present. This was cut for the anime, possibly due to how clunky the implementation would have been, but it may be injected later into the story. There are aspects to this history that as the series progresses you will learn are inaccurate, as Rudius begins to learn the secrets of this world, so it works more as an accepted history that the average side character would know. I started getting an overview of this world's history with the book I borrowed from the library. It showed that this world had existed for at least 10,000 years. Its history was truly fantastical. The gist of that history was as follows. More than 100,000 years ago, the world was split into 7 smaller worlds, each with its own god to rule over it. This was called the Ancient Age of the Gods. There were 7 worlds, and their respective gods were the world of the humans, human god, the world of the demons, demon god, the world of the dragons, dragon god, the world of the beasts, beast god, the ocean world, sea god, the sky world, sky god, and the void world, void god. These worlds were separated by barriers, so coming and going was no easy task. Someone who lived in one world had no idea that there were other ones. Only the gods and those strong enough to cross those barriers knew of the other worlds. 20,000 to 10,000 years ago. In the dragon world, an incorrigibly evil dragon god was born. With his incredible and dreadful power, he destroyed the barriers separating the worlds. With his followers, known as the 5 dragon generals, he began destroying the other worlds. Survivors from each world fled to the other worlds seeking shelter. When there was only one world left, the dragon god's generals finally turned on him. The head of the 5 dragon generals, the dragon emperor, and the other 4 dragon kings fought the dragon god in his overwhelming power, 5 versus 1 in a battle to the death. It ended in a draw. The dragon world had crumbled in the aftermath, leaving only the human world, that was this world. 10,000 to 8,000 years ago. Known as the Chaotic Period, a period where the ancestors of modern humans and the refugees from the other worlds, after being thrown together, began clashing. There exists almost no literature from this period, but according to scholars, after many years of strife, the races slowly became segregated. The beast folk began living in the woods, the water folk controlled the oceans, and the sky folk secured the highest places they could find. There were nearly no dragon folk left, but they avoided attention and lived secretly, while the void folk, who could live anywhere, spread themselves out. That left the humans and the demons to fight between themselves on the plains. At the time, the Central Continent and the Demon Continent were still joined by land and called the Great Continent, approximately 7,000 years ago. Martial arts and magic were developed, and the population increased. This was also when the first Great Human-Demon War occurred. As the name implies, it was a head-on collision between the humans and the demons. It was a long battle that involved not only the humans and demons, but other races. Approximately 6,000 years ago. 1,000 years passed as the Great War raged on, with fierce battles and laws interspersed between. The hero Aris led 6 comrades into battle, continuing the hostilities until he defeated the 5 great demon kings and the great demon emperor Kishirika. Approximately 5,500 years ago. Being the fools that they were, the humans got drunk off power from defeating the demons and began warring against the other races, as well as among themselves. Demons were reportedly used as slaves at this time. This period of constant war continued for almost 500 years. 5,000 years ago, the Second Great Human-Demon War broke out. Seeking vengeance for a 1,000-year grudge, Kishirika, the great emperor of the demon world, stirred the demons into action. The demons made allies of the beast folk and sea folk, overwhelming the humans. The humans were driven into a corner. 4,200 years ago, the Second Great Human-Demon War came to an end. The warmongering humans fought for 800 years without admitting defeat, and finally forced the enemy back. This was thanks to the efforts of the legendary hero Golden Knight Aldebaran. He defeated all the powerful demons he encountered and fought one-on-one with the Great Demon Emperor. His final attack was so powerful it created a hole in the Great Continent, splitting it into the Central Continent and the Demon Continent, with the Ring of Sea in between. One passage wrote that he was the human god himself. The whole bit about him splitting the continent sounded like a load of garbage, but it was true. The continent had separated into 2, forming a new ocean. A long-sought peace finally settled over the land once the continent split. 4,200 to 1,000 years ago. Time passed quickly after that. The world was at peace, but the demons were being driven from the Central Continent. The humans were a clever bunch, using diplomacy to corral all the demons onto the Demon Continent. The Central Continent's land was naturally lush and easy to live on. whereas the demon continent's land was barren and prone to magic accumulation in certain areas. By forcing the last of those foul demons onto the demon continent and blockading it, the humans were metaphorically slipping a silk cord around their necks and strangling them with it. This was all done with cooperation from the other races in hopes that there would never be another great human-demon war ever again. The demons most likely resisted in some way, but they were, after all, on the receiving end of a concerted attack. Whatever the reaction was, no war broke out. As a result, they soon became desensitized to the way they had been restricted from leaving their continent. In that harsh environment with scarce resources being fought over, civil war naturally broke out. This forced them into fierce warriors, but their numbers dwindled. 1,000 years ago, the demon god Laplace came into being. In the long history of the demons, there were many demon kings and many demon emperors, but this was the first one people referred to as the demon god. In a relative blink of the eye, Laplace rallied the demons and conquered the demon continent. The records from the battles at that time turned to war chronicles that were passed down. Even now on the demon continent, Laplace is still treated like an idol. Laplace spent many years cultivating his empire, grooming his race to be tough and fierce. 500 years ago, the start of Laplace's military campaign. After many long years spent winning over the sea folk and the beast folk, Laplace finally made an assault on the central continent. The humans were forced into a war far more brutal than they'd ever fought before. Laplace launched his invasion from the south, drawing all the humans' military power there. Then he set his dragons out upon the land, making passage through the mountains impossible. After that, he took the humans by storm, attacking with a separate unit from the north, scattering his enemies in short time. He had gained total control of the north and the south, and from both directions he pressed his assault of the western region. 400 years ago. Forced into a corner, the humans took their last gamble. The 7 heroes convinced the sea folk to lift their blockade, then set out on the seas for the Millis continent. Millis had escaped the invasion for many reasons, such as the barrier around Holy Millis, its robust army of holy knights, and the topography that made it difficult for a large army to disembark. Part of the reason that they were so isolated was also due to the great forest that covered the north. Now allied with the demons, the beast folk had taken control of the holy city of Millis, so the 7 heroes set about persuading them to their side. Or rather, the 7 went to the head of each clan, took their children hostage, and threatened them into cooperation. In the book it was written that the children cooperated willingly, but I wasn't deceived by such an obvious spin. It came to the day of the decisive battle. The last remaining kingdom of humans on the central continent, the kingdom of Asura, mounted all their effort in the final battle. Soon the 7 heroes came, leading the holy knights of Millis and the beast folk in an assault on Laplace's main stronghold. After a violent confrontation, 4 of the 7 heroes were dead, but they successfully sealed Laplace away and destroyed his closest companions. 3 heroes survived, the dragon king Urupin, the north god Kalman, and the armored dragon king Perugius. They were referred to as the 3 legendary demon god slayers. Though Laplace was defeated, the humans were greatly exhausted from the battle and couldn't keep the fight up anymore. Instead, they signed a treaty with one of the demon kings back on the demon continent, one that wasn't allied with Laplace and led a more moderate faction, the demons. The blockade on the demon continent was lifted. The demons could now freely travel to other continents. According to the terms of the treaty, racial discrimination against demons was prohibited. Though the deep-seated trend of discrimination against the demons continued, things were mostly peaceful. From all this, I understood a couple of things. 1. Cutting things off the number 7 was done for historical reasons. There were 7 legendary heroes and 7 worlds. Thus the lucky number was 7. 6 was unlucky since there were 5 dragon generals and 5 great demon kings, each which added up to 6 when counting their respective leaders. 2. The various races like the elves, dwarves, and halflings were subspecies, but they were counted among the demons. It was possible that there were new races that had developed during the chaotic period, or perhaps they had something to do with the void folk. Incidentally, part of the reason so much knowledge about this long history existed was because some species were immortal. This was the case for the great Emperor Kashirika as well as a few other demon kings. Well, that's it for the reading. I hope you enjoyed listening, and please subscribe.